The red-eye flight from Washington, D.C. touched down at Denver International Airport just after midnight. Most passengers looked tired and eager to get home, but Captain Maya Rodriguez stepped off the plane with the same alert posture she'd maintained for the past 12 years in the Army. Her body might have been exhausted from 3 days of classified briefings at the Pentagon, but her mind stayed sharp. Maya pulled her small duffel bag from the overhead compartment and made her way down the narrow aisle. She wore simple civilian clothes, dark jeans, a plain gray hoodie, and comfortable sneakers. Nothing fancy, nothing that would draw attention. That's exactly how she liked it when she wasn't in uniform. The airport felt different at this hour. Fewer crowds, dimmer lighting, and that strange quiet that only comes in the middle of the night. Maya's footsteps echoed slightly on the polished floor as she walked through the gate area. She moved with purpose, the way soldiers do when they have somewhere to be. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister asking if she'd landed safely. Maya smiled and quickly typed back that she was fine and would call in the morning. Family always worried when she traveled for work, even though most of her dangerous days were behind her now. These Pentagon meetings were routine compared to her time overseas. As she walked toward the main terminal, Maya noticed the usual mix of late-night travelers. A businessman in a wrinkled suit scrolled through emails on his phone. A young mother tried to keep her toddler quiet while waiting for their next flight. An elderly couple sat close together, sharing a bag of airport snacks. Maya's training kicked in automatically as she observed her surroundings. It wasn't paranoia, just habit. In the military, you learn to notice everything and everyone around you. The security guard by the information desk looked half asleep. 2 airline employees chatted quietly near the gate counter. Everything seemed normal and peaceful. She checked her watch and calculated the drive home. If traffic stayed light, she could be in her own bed within an hour. The thought of her comfortable apartment and a hot shower motivated her to walk a little faster. That's when things started to go wrong. Officer Bradley Wilson had been working airport security for 6 years, but tonight felt particularly long. His partner called in sick, leaving him to handle twice as much ground. The radio chatter had been busy all evening with reports of various incidents around the airport. Nothing too serious, but enough to keep everyone on edge. Around 12:30 a.m., dispatch crackled over his radio about a theft at one of the gift shops. The description was vague. Someone had apparently stolen some electronics and might still be in the terminal. Wilson only caught part of the transmission because he was dealing with a drunk passenger at the time. From what he heard, they were looking for someone wearing dark clothing with a bag. The description seemed to fit about half the people in the airport, but Wilson figured he'd keep an eye out anyway. When he spotted Maya walking through the terminal with her duffel bag and dark hoodie, something clicked in his mind. She fit the basic description and she was moving with what he interpreted as suspicious urgency. Wilson didn't stop to consider that Maya was simply tired and wanted to get home. He grabbed his radio and called for backup, then started following Maya from a distance. In his mind, he was being careful and professional. In reality, he was about to make a terrible mistake based on incomplete information and poor assumptions. Maya sensed someone watching her before she saw him. It's a skill you develop in combat zones, that awareness of when eyes are on you. She glanced around casually and spotted the security officer about 30 feet behind her. He seemed to be following her general path, but she didn't think much of it at first. Security guards patrol terminals all the time, but when she turned toward the exit and the officer changed direction to match hers, Maya's instincts sharpened. She slowed her pace slightly and pretended to look at her phone while actually watching the officer's reflection in the window of a closed restaurant. He was definitely following her now. Maya ran through possibilities in her head. Maybe there was some kind of security alert she didn't know about. Maybe they were checking all passengers from certain flights. She decided to stay calm and see what happened. Officer Wilson called in his location and requested immediate backup. He told dispatch he had eyes on a possible suspect matching the theft description. What he didn't mention was how loose that match actually was, or that he hadn't made any attempt to verify his suspicions before calling for help. 2 more officers responded to the call. Officer Rodriguez, no relation to Maya despite sharing a last name, arrived first, followed by Officer Kim. Both were younger than Wilson and looked up to him as the senior officer on duty. Wilson quickly briefed them about the theft and pointed out Maya, who was now only about 50 yards from the exit, To the three officers, she looked like someone trying to leave the scene quickly. They didn't consider that she might simply be a tired traveler heading home. Maya reached the main corridor leading to the exit when she heard rapid footsteps behind her. She turned around to see three security officers approaching her with serious expressions on their faces. Her military training immediately kicked into high gear. Stay calm. Assess the situation. Follow lawful orders. Don't escalate. Excuse me, ma'am, Officer Wilson called out when he was still about 20 feet away. We need you to stop right there. Maya stopped walking and turned to face them completely. She kept her hands visible and her posture non-threatening, but her mind was racing through possibilities. Is there a problem, officers? We need to ask you some questions, Wilson said, his hand moving to rest on his radio. Can you put your bag down and keep your hands where we can see them? Maya complied immediately, setting her duffel bag on the floor beside her feet. Of course. What's this about? But Wilson was already speaking into his radio, calling for additional backup and reporting that he had stopped a possible suspect. Maya heard enough of the transmission to understand that they thought she was involved in some kind of theft. Officers, I think there's been a misunderstanding, Maya said calmly. I just got off a flight from Washington, D.C. I haven't been shopping or anywhere else in the airport. I can show you my boarding pass and ID if that helps. Officer Kim looked like he wanted to hear what Maya had to say, but Wilson was clearly in charge of the situation. Ma'am, we're going to need you to put your hands behind your head and get down on your knees. Maya felt her stomach drop. This was escalating far beyond a simple misunderstanding. But her training told her to comply with lawful orders from law enforcement, even when those orders seemed excessive. I'm going to reach slowly for my wallet to show you my identification, Maya said, moving her hand very deliberately toward her back pocket. That's when everything went completely wrong. Wilson saw Maya's hand moving toward her waistband and immediately assumed the worst. Don't move, he shouted, his hand flying to his weapon. Keep your hands up. The other two officers reacted to Wilson's alarm, also reaching for their service weapons. Maya froze completely, her hand halfway to her pocket. As three armed officers pointed their guns in her direction, the busy terminal suddenly felt very quiet and very dangerous. Time seemed to slow down as Maya stared at three drawn weapons pointed in her direction. The terminal's fluorescent lights felt suddenly too bright, casting harsh shadows across the officers' faces. Maya had been in combat situations before, but this felt different, more dangerous somehow because it was so unexpected and so wrong. Hands up. Now, Officer Wilson shouted again, his voice echoing through the terminal. Maya slowly raised both hands above her head, her military training taking complete control. Never make sudden movements. Always follow commands. Stay alive first, sort everything out later. My hands are up, she said clearly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The scene was drawing attention from the few other travelers in the terminal. A businessman waiting for a late connection looked up from his laptop with wide eyes. The young mother Maya had noticed earlier quickly pulled her toddler behind a pillar, shielding the child's view. Officer Rodriguez stepped forward with handcuffs ready. Turn around slowly and put your hands behind your back. Maya did exactly as instructed, turning to face away from the officers. She felt the cold metal of handcuffs click around her wrists, tighter than they needed to be. The sound echoed strangely in the mostly empty terminal. This is a mistake, Maya said calmly as Officer Rodriguez patted her down for weapons. I'm Captain Maya Rodriguez, United States Army. My identification is in my back pocket. Wilson snorted. Right, and I'm a Navy SEAL. Lady, you can tell your stories to the detective downtown. Maya closed her eyes for a moment, fighting back frustration. In combat, she'd faced enemies who at least knew why they were fighting her. This was different. These officers had already decided she was guilty of something, and nothing she said was going to change their minds right now. Officer Kim finally spoke up. Should we at least check her ID before we take her in? She was reaching for her waistband when we told her to stop, Wilson replied sharply. Could have been going for a weapon. We'll sort out her story at the station. Maya wanted to explain that she'd been reaching for her wallet, exactly like she'd told them she was going to do, but she could hear in Wilson's tone that he wasn't interested in explanations right now. Better to stay quiet and let the situation play out. More security officers arrived as backup, creating an even bigger scene. Maya found herself surrounded by 6 uniformed officers, all treating her like a dangerous criminal. The absurdity of it would have been funny if it wasn't happening to her. Officer Kim knelt down to examine Maya's duffel bag. He unzipped it carefully and started pulling out the contents. Military uniforms neatly folded and pressed, official documents with Pentagon letterhead, a small American flag pin, combat boots polished to a mirror shine. "Hey, Wilson," Kim said quietly. "Take a look at this stuff." But Wilson was busy trying to manage the growing crowd of onlookers. More travelers had stopped to watch the drama unfold. Several people had their phones out, recording everything. Maya could hear whispered conversations about police brutality and racial profiling. "This is absolutely ridiculous," said an older woman watching from near the coffee shop. "That poor girl hasn't done anything wrong." A college-aged man with his phone held high was providing live commentary to his social media followers. "Y'all, this is crazy. They got this lady in handcuffs and she was literally just walking to the exit. This is exactly the kind of stuff we've been talking about." Maya tried to block out the growing attention and focus on staying calm. Getting angry wouldn't help anything right now. But she was definitely making mental notes about everything that was happening. Badge numbers, faces, witness locations, security camera positions. If she was going to fight this later, she'd need details. Officer Rodriguez seemed uncomfortable with how the situation was developing. "Ma'am, what's your full name?" he asked Maya quietly. "Captain Maya Rodriguez, United States Army," she replied. "Serial number 123456789. I was returning from classified briefings at the Pentagon. My military ID is in my wallet." Rodriguez looked at Wilson meaningfully. "Maybe we should check her ID before we go any further with this." Wilson was getting frustrated with all the attention they were drawing. "Fine, but we're checking it at the station, not here in front of all these people with cameras." They started walking Maya through the terminal toward the security office. Each step felt humiliating as dozens of eyes followed their progress. Maya kept her head up and her shoulders straight, refusing to look defeated even though she felt like she was living through a nightmare. A woman with a small child stepped forward as they passed. "Excuse me, officers, but I saw everything. This lady didn't do anything wrong. She was just walking to the exit." "Ma'am, please step back," Wilson said curtly. "This is official police business." But more voices started speaking up. "I saw it too," called out a man in airport worker coveralls. She wasn't bothering nobody, just minding her own business. Maya was surprised by the support from strangers, but she also worried that the crowd might make the officers more defensive and aggressive. The last thing anyone needed was for this situation to get worse. They reached the airport security office and Maya was placed in a small holding area. It wasn't quite a jail cell, but it was close enough. A single metal chair, white walls, and a small window looking out at the main office area. Officer Kim set Maya's duffel bag on a table and continued examining the contents more carefully. He found her Pentagon access badge, several official military documents, and a small metal case. His expression started to change as he realized what he was looking at. "Wilson, you need to see this," Kim said urgently. But Wilson was on the phone with his supervisor, trying to explain why they had arrested someone without actually confirming that she'd committed any crime. The conversation wasn't going well. Maya sat in the holding area and tried to process what was happening to her. 3 hours ago, she'd been in a secure briefing room discussing counter-terrorism strategies with some of the most powerful people in the military. Now she was sitting in handcuffs, being treated like a common criminal. She thought about her sister's text asking if she'd landed safely. She thought about her commanding officer, who would probably hear about this mess by morning. She thought about all the young soldiers she'd trained and led, who looked up to her as an example of what they could achieve. Most of all, she thought about how many other people had probably been through something similar, but without the resources and training to fight back effectively. Regular citizens who didn't have military backgrounds or powerful connections, who might just accept this kind of treatment as normal. That thought made her angrier than her own situation did. Officer Rodriguez finally approached Wilson with Maya's military ID and Pentagon access badge. "You need to look at this right now," he said firmly. Wilson glanced at the documents, but he was too focused on damage control to really process what he was seeing. "We'll verify all this stuff downtown. Right now, I just want to get her processed and out of here before this circus gets any worse." Through the window, Maya could see that the crowd outside had grown larger. Airport staff were trying to manage the situation, but people seemed reluctant to move along. Several travelers had apparently missed their flights because they were so focused on watching the drama unfold. Maya realized that this situation had already become much bigger than just her own inconvenience. Whether she liked it or not, she was now the center of a very public incident that was being recorded and shared across social media. Whatever happened next would have consequences far beyond just her own life. She took a deep breath and started planning her next moves. This wasn't over, not by a long shot, Detective Lisa. Chen had been looking forward to a quiet night shift when her phone rang at 1:15 a.m. The voice on the other end belonged to Sergeant Martinez from Airport Security, and he sounded stressed. "We've got a situation here that's getting out of hand," Martinez explained. "Officers arrested someone for theft, but now we've got crowds, social media, and questions about whether we got the right person." Chen sighed and reached for her coffee cup. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that involve military IDs and Pentagon access badges," Martinez said. "Plus about 50 videos of the arrest going viral online. Can you get down here?" 20 minutes later, Chen walked into the airport security office to find controlled chaos. Officers were huddled around computers, watching social media posts about the arrest. The phones were ringing constantly with calls from news outlets and concerned citizens. She found Maya still sitting in the holding area, now with her handcuffs removed but clearly not free to leave. Even sitting in that uncomfortable plastic chair, Maya maintained perfect posture and a calm expression that immediately caught Chen's attention. "Good morning," Chen said as she entered the holding area. "I'm Detective Chen. I understand there might be some confusion about what happened tonight." Maya looked up with sharp, intelligent eyes. "Good morning, Detective. There's no confusion on my end. I was walking to the airport exit when these officers decided I matched some description of a theft suspect. I've been trying to show them my military identification for the past hour." Something about Maya's tone and bearing made Chen take notice. This wasn't the way most people spoke after being arrested. Maya sounded like someone accustomed to giving briefings and expecting to be taken seriously. "Let me take a look at your identification," Chen said. Maya gestured toward the table where her belongings were spread out. "Everything you need should be right there." Chen walked over to examine the items more carefully than the other officers had bothered to do. The military ID immediately caught her attention. Captain Maya Rodriguez with an impressive list of credentials and security clearances. The Pentagon access badge was current, issued just 2 weeks ago. But it was the other items that really made Chen's eyebrows raise. Combat deployment medals, including a Purple Heart. Commendation letters from high-ranking officials. A small photo of Maya in full dress uniform, standing with what looked like a group of Pentagon officials. "Officer Wilson," Chen called out sharply. "Can you walk me through exactly what led to this arrest?" Wilson looked uncomfortable as he approached. "We got a call about a theft from one of the gift shops." The description matched the suspect. Dark clothing, carrying a bag, moving quickly through the terminal. Chen looked at him skeptically. "What was stolen?" "Electronics. Some kind of tablet or laptop, I think. You think? Don't you have specific details about the crime?" Wilson shifted nervously. "Dispatch was handling multiple situations tonight. The details were basic." Chen was already pulling up the incident reports on her tablet. It took her less than 5 minutes to find the real theft report. The actual suspect had been caught on security cameras 2 hours before Maya's flight even landed. White male, early 20s, completely different build and appearance. "Officer Wilson," Chen said quietly. "The theft suspect was arrested at 10:30 p.m. Captain Rodriguez's flight didn't land until after midnight." The color drained from Wilson's face. "What?" Chen turned to Officer Kim, who had been quietly examining Maya's military documents. "Did anyone bother to verify her identity before making the arrest?" Kim shook his head. "Wilson said we'd sort it out at the station. He was concerned she might be armed when she reached for her pocket. I told them I was reaching for my identification," Maya said calmly from across the room. "I announced my intentions clearly and read slowly. Chen was getting a clearer picture of what had happened, and it wasn't good. She walked back over to Maya with her military ID and Pentagon badge. "Captain Rodriguez, can you tell me what you were doing in Washington, D.C.? "Classified briefings at the Pentagon," Maya replied. "I can provide contact information for my commanding officer if you need verification." Chen nodded and stepped outside the holding area to make a phone call. She reached Colonel Davidson at Fort Carson, who confirmed Maya's identity and explained that she'd been attending high-level security briefings for the past 3 days. "Detective, Colonel Davidson said, his voice carrying clear concern. Captain Rodriguez is one of our most decorated officers. She's been recommended for promotion and is being considered for some very sensitive assignments. Whatever happened tonight, I hope it can be resolved quickly and quietly. When Chen returned to the holding area, she found Maya sitting in the exact same position, hands folded calmly in her lap. Captain, I've verified your identity and your recent activities. I want to apologize for what you've been through tonight. Maya nodded acknowledgement but didn't look particularly relieved. I appreciate that, Detective, but an apology doesn't address the bigger issues here. What do you mean? Maya stood up slowly, her full presence now commanding the small room. I mean that 3 officers drew weapons on an innocent person based on the loosest possible description. I mean that they refused to examine identification when offered. I mean that this entire incident was recorded by dozens of witnesses and is now spreading across social media. Chen realized that Maya wasn't just a victim looking for an apology. She was a military officer who understood the serious implications of what had happened. Your officers made assumptions based on my appearance and behavior that they would never have made about someone who looked different, Maya continued. That's a problem that goes way beyond tonight. By this time, the situation outside the security office had grown even more complex. News crews were starting to arrive at the airport. The hashtag their airport arrest was trending on social media, with multiple videos showing different angles of Maya being handcuffed and led away. Airport Director Patricia Walsh arrived looking harried and concerned. She'd been woken up by calls from reporters asking for comments about racial profiling and police misconduct at her facility. Chen briefed Walsh and the other supervisors about what she'd discovered. The real theft suspect had been in custody for hours before Maya even arrived. The description that led to Maya's arrest was so vague it could have applied to hundreds of travelers. And most importantly, they now had a decorated military officer who had been publicly humiliated based on faulty police work. We need to handle this very carefully, Walsh said quietly. This isn't just about tonight anymore. This is about our reputation and procedures. Maya overheard the conversation and decided it was time to make her position clear. She approached the group of supervisors with the same confidence she brought to military briefings. Director Walsh, Detective Chen, I want to be very clear about something, Maya said. I don't want this incident swept under the rug with quiet apologies. What happened tonight was wrong, and it's going to keep happening to other people until there are real consequences and real changes. The room fell quiet as everyone absorbed what Maya had just said. This wasn't going to be resolved with a simple apology and a request to keep things quiet. Chen found herself respecting Maya's position, even though it was going to make everyone's life more complicated. What are you planning to do, Captain? Maya's expression was calm but determined. I'm planning to make sure this never happens to anyone else. Outside, the first news van pulled up to the terminal entrance. By morning, this story would be national news, whether the airport officials wanted it to be or not. The situation had moved far beyond a simple case of mistaken identity. It was now a test of accountability, justice, and whether institutions would take responsibility for their failures. And Maya Rodriguez was exactly the wrong person to try to intimidate into silence. Maya was finally released from the airport security office at 3:30 a.m., but she didn't head straight home like everyone expected. Instead, she asked to speak with whoever was in charge of the entire operation. Detective Chen tried to suggest that maybe she should get some rest and deal with everything in the morning. But Maya's expression made it clear that wasn't happening. Detective, I've been awake for 20 hours, handcuffed and humiliated in front of dozens of people, and treated like a criminal for the simple act of walking through an airport while black, Maya said quietly. I'm not going home to sleep this off. Airport Director Walsh agreed to meet with Maya in her office, probably hoping to contain the situation before it got any worse. She was joined by Police Chief Robert Thompson, who had been called in to assess the damage to his department's reputation. Maya entered the director's office at 4 a.m., looking nothing like someone who had just been through a traumatic experience. Her posture was straight, her expression focused, and she carried herself with the unmistakable presence of someone used to command authority. Director Walsh, Chief Thompson, Maya said as she took a seat across from them. I want to discuss what happened tonight and what's going to happen next. Walsh tried to start with an apology, but Maya held up her hand politely but firmly. Before we talk about apologies, let me walk you through exactly what your officers did wrong tonight, Maya said, pulling out a small notebook she'd been writing in during her time in the holding area. Maya opened her notebook and began reading with the precision of a military briefing. At approximately 12:45 a.m., Officer Wilson initiated surveillance of my person, based on a description so vague it could have applied to half the travelers in the airport. He made no attempt to verify this information or gather additional details about the actual suspect. Chief Thompson shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Maya continued without looking up from her notes. At 12:52 a.m., Officer Wilson called for backup without making any attempt to identify me or determine whether I actually matched the suspect description. When I offered to show identification, Officer Wilson refused to examine it. Maya flipped to the next page. At 12:54 a.m., 3 armed officers drew their weapons because I reached slowly for my wallet after clearly announcing my intention to show identification. This represents a dangerous escalation based on no legitimate threat assessment. The room was completely quiet except for Maya's voice. She wasn't angry or emotional. She was simply laying out facts like she was briefing superior officers about a military operation. At 1:05 a.m., I was handcuffed and searched without probable cause, in full view of multiple civilians who were recording the incident. At no point during this process did any officer examine my identification, despite my repeated offers to provide it. Maya closed her notebook and looked directly at the 2 officials. This entire incident represents multiple failures in training, procedure, and judgment, and it was all captured on video by witnesses. Director Walsh tried to respond, but Maya wasn't finished. I spent the last 3 days in classified briefings about protecting American citizens from terrorist threats, Maya said. Tonight I was treated like a terrorist threat by the very people who are supposed to protect American citizens. Do you see the problem here? Chief Thompson finally found his voice. Captain Rodriguez, I want to assure you that we take this very seriously. We'll be conducting a full investigation into tonight's events. Maya's expression didn't change. Chief, that's not nearly enough. Your officers didn't just make a mistake. They demonstrated clear bias and poor judgment that could have had much worse consequences. She pulled out her phone and showed them one of the viral videos. This has been viewed over 1 million times in the past 3 hours. The hashtag to airport justice is trending nationally. People are calling for boycotts of this airport and investigations into your police practices. Walsh looked pale as she watched the video of Maya being handcuffed. The optics were terrible. A composed, well-dressed woman being treated like a dangerous criminal while trying to cooperate with officers. What do you want from us? Walsh asked quietly. Maya had clearly thought about this question. I want real accountability. Officer Wilson and the others involved need to face consequences for their actions. I want comprehensive bias training for all security personnel. I want new procedures for identity verification before arrests. And I want civilian oversight of airport police operations. Chief Thompson looked skeptical. Captain, those are pretty extensive demands. Some of those changes would require approval from multiple agencies and departments. Maya's expression hardened slightly. Chief, those aren't demands. They're the minimum requirements for ensuring this doesn't happen again. Because if you think I'm going to quietly accept an apology and move on, you've seriously misjudged the situation. She stood up and began pacing slightly, her military bearing becoming even more apparent. I've led soldiers in combat zones where the stakes were life and death. I've made split-second decisions under extreme pressure. What your officers did tonight wasn't a split-second decision. It was a series of choices based on assumptions and biases. Maya stopped pacing and looked directly at both officials. I'm filing formal complaints with Internal Affairs, the Airport Authority, the NACP, the ACLU, and the Department of Justice. I'm also consulting with military legal counsel about potential violations of my rights as a service member. The room fell silent again. Maya had just outlined a legal and public relations nightmare that could drag on for months or years. There might be another way to handle this, Walsh said carefully. Perhaps we could discuss some kind of settlement arrangement. Maya cut her off immediately. Director, this isn't about money. This is about justice and accountability. You can't pay me to forget what happened or to ignore the systemic problems that caused it. She sat back down and opened her notebook again. Since we're talking about settlements, let me tell you what I discovered while I was sitting in your holding cell. In the past 2 years, your airport police have made 47 arrests for theft and suspicious activity. Want to guess what percentage of those arrests involve people of color? Neither official answered, but their expression suggested they knew the number wasn't good. 68%, Maya continued. Despite the fact that people of color make up less than 30% of travelers through this airport. That's not a coincidence, that's a pattern of discrimination. Maya closed her notebook and stood up again. So no, I won't be accepting any settlement offers or keeping quiet about what happened. This is about more than just me. It's about every person who has been or will be subjected to this kind of treatment. Chief Thompson tried one more approach. Captain, surely we can work together to find a solution that addresses your concerns without creating unnecessary publicity. Maya's response was swift and final. Chief, the only unnecessary thing that happened tonight was 3 of your officers drawing guns on an innocent person. Everything that happens next is a direct consequence of that decision. She walked toward the door, then turned back one more time. You have 48 hours to announce a comprehensive investigation and immediate procedural changes. After that, I go public with everything I know about this incident and your department's track record. As Maya left the office, Walsh and Thompson sat in stunned silence, realizing they were dealing with someone who had the knowledge, resources, and determination to turn their quiet incident into a national scandal. Outside, the first morning news crews were already setting up cameras in the airport parking lot. Maya's story was about to become much bigger than anyone had anticipated. 3 months after that night at Denver International Airport, Maya Rodriguez stood at the podium in a packed conference room at the Colorado Convention Center. The audience included civil rights activists, law enforcement officials, military personnel, and journalists from across the country. What had started as a simple case of mistaken identity had grown into something much larger. Good morning, Maya began, her voice carrying the same calm authority that had impressed Detective Chen that night. 3 months ago, I was handcuffed in an airport for the crime of walking while black. Today, I want to talk about what we've learned since then and where we go from here. The incident had indeed become a national story, just as Maya had predicted. Video clips of her arrest had been viewed millions of times across social media platforms. The hashtag #DoanCaptainJustice had trended for weeks, drawing attention not just to Maya's case but to similar incidents across the country. But Maya hadn't been content to simply be a symbol. She'd used her military training and natural leadership skills to turn her experience into a campaign for real change. Within 2 weeks of the incident, Officer Wilson had been suspended pending investigation. 2 other officers received mandatory retraining and were placed on probation. More importantly, Denver International Airport had implemented comprehensive new procedures for suspect identification and arrest protocols. The changes weren't just cosmetic. Airport security now required officers to verify specific details about suspected crimes before making arrests. They had to attempt identity verification through multiple methods before using restraints, and all incidents involving drawn weapons were now reviewed by civilian oversight boards. Maya had also discovered something that validated her suspicions about systemic problems. When investigators dug deeper into airport arrest records, they found exactly the patterns Maya had identified. Minority travelers were being stopped and arrested at rates far higher than their representation among passengers. The numbers don't lie, Maya told the conference audience. And they reveal problems that go far beyond one bad night or one prejudiced officer. They show us systems that need to change. The legal consequences had been swift and comprehensive. Maya's civil lawsuit against the airport and police department resulted in a settlement that included both financial compensation and mandated policy changes. But Maya had donated most of the money to organizations working on criminal justice reform. This was never about getting rich, Maya had told reporters. This was about making sure what happened to me doesn't happen to other people. The story had resonated particularly strongly in military communities. Veterans organizations had rallied around Maya's case, pointing out the irony of a decorated soldier being treated like a criminal while returning from service to her country. Colonel Davidson, Maya's commanding officer, had become an unexpected ally in pushing for broader changes. He'd testified before Congress about the challenges faced by minority service members in civilian situations. Captain Rodriguez represents everything we want in our military leaders, Colonel Davidson had told a congressional committee. The fact that she was treated as a threat instead of as a hero tells us something important about assumptions and biases in our society. Maya's story had also inspired changes beyond Denver. Airports across the country began reviewing their own policies and procedures. Several cities implemented new oversight mechanisms for airport police. Training programs were updated to address implicit bias and de-escalation techniques. But perhaps the most significant impact was on Maya herself. She'd discovered a new mission that felt as important as her military service. "I never wanted to become an activist," Maya told the conference audience. "I just wanted to serve my country and do my job." But sometimes life puts you in a position where you have to choose between staying quiet and speaking up for what's right. Maya had been invited to speak at dozens of events across the country. She'd testified before legislative committees, consulted with police departments on training programs, and worked with civil rights organizations on policy reforms. The transformation hadn't been easy. Maya was used to the structured environment of military life, where chains of command and clear procedures governed most situations. Civilian activism was messier, more complicated, and often frustrating. But she'd found ways to apply her military skills to this new challenge. She approached each speaking engagement like a mission briefing. She researched her audiences, prepared detailed presentations, and set clear objectives for each event. "Change doesn't happen because people feel bad about injustice," Maya explained to the conference. "Change happens because people with power decide that the cost of maintaining the status quo is higher than the cost of reform." Maya had also learned to navigate the media attention that came with her story. She'd been featured in major newspapers, appeared on national television, and been profiled in military magazines. Through it all, she'd maintained the same composed demeanor that had impressed everyone who met her. The speaking engagement at the Colorado Convention Center was special because it marked the release of a comprehensive report on airport policing practices that Maya had helped compile. The 6-month study had examined policies and arrest patterns at major airports across the country. The findings were sobering but not surprising. Minority travelers faced higher rates of stops, searches, and arrests at almost every airport studied. The disparities couldn't be explained by differences in behavior or legitimate security concerns. "We now have data that proves what many people have known from personal experience," Maya told the audience. "Bias in policing isn't limited to city streets. It extends to airports, which are supposed to be safe spaces for all travelers." As Maya wrapped up her presentation, she reflected on how much her life had changed since that night in Denver. She was still a captain in the U.S. Army, still proud of her military service, but she'd also become something she never expected: a voice for justice and accountability in civilian law enforcement. The work wasn't finished, and Maya knew it might never be completely finished. But she'd learned that even one person, armed with courage and determination, could create ripple effects that reached far beyond their own experience. 3 months ago, "I was just trying to get home from a business trip," Maya concluded. "Today I'm part of a movement that's making airports safer and more just for everyone. That's not the kind of mission I trained for in the military, but it's just as important." As the audience applauded, Maya felt the same sense of purpose she'd always found in military service. She was still serving her country, just in a different uniform and on a different kind of battlefield. The fight for justice required the same qualities that made good soldiers: courage, persistence, attention to detail, and an unwillingness to give up when facing difficult odds. Maya Rodriguez had all of those qualities, and she was just getting started. Outside the convention center, a new generation of activists and reformers were already planning their next moves, inspired by the example of a soldier who refused to let injustice go unchallenged. The story that began with handcuffs in an airport had become something much larger, a reminder that real change starts with individuals who decide they won't accept things the way they are. Maya's mission was far from over, but she'd already proven something important. Sometimes the most powerful weapon against injustice is simply refusing to stay silent.